Hello everyone, I'm Kaleb Gillock, and today I'm joined by Senior Pastor Jeff Johnson and Church Elder Eric Stewart. Today we're going to talk about the vision of the church in the past and where it's at now, as well as the future. Thanks for joining me and taking some time out of your day today, you guys.
Thanks, Caleb. Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, just start off by telling us a brief history of the church.
Wow, well, Jeff can't really do that because he doesn't have that history, I don't think. And I've got some. I have to admit up front, and those who have been through that history of the church know that I was not heavily involved in the church in its whole location in downtown Cadiz. But my wife and I were married in that church, so I do have some familiarity with it. It was a great little church. We probably had, our average attendance was probably about in the 50 vicinity, something like that. There were a lot of quirky things about that church. One of them being that there was virtually no parking. So whenever we came to church in that building, frequently we would have to park across 38 to actually go to church. You have to walk across the highway to go to church, which was not uncommon. The people who had been there would laugh too because they know that. The other quirky thing was the basement had various states of difficult situations. When we got married,
did it have the old mucky, churchy smell?
Yeah, it was kind of that. Yeah, it was kind of that moldy smell. And this was where Sunday school classes were going on and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so when we got married there, we opted to have the reception at the Cadiz Community Building because we didn't know if it was going to rain or not, and if it did, what would the water level be, in the basement? So it had some quirky things, but it very much is like the church now, in that it was just a very friendly, receptive. People were just really nice, so that has never changed about this church. Even as it has grown and become 4 times that size, it still has that same foundational feel to it when you walk into the church, which is really cool, and it's obviously a God thing that happens.
Jeff, what about the church now?
The church now? I echo what Eric said. It has that same feeling of friendliness and closeness. We've talked at times about especially when the attendance is really high, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could go to 2 services and kind of give more space, and everybody would not enjoy that idea because we like each other. We like to be with each other. So I would say the church now is in that same place we were before, where we need to find ways, though, to help in the areas that we are starting to run out of room.
But here's a key difference between then and now, and that is the amount of young kids that are in the church. When we were in the old building, I could have possibly been the youngest person at that time in the building. I don't know. I was pretty close to it. There just weren't a lot. There were some kids. I don't want to say there were none, but it was a very small part of it. That's, if you talk to people who have been in the church for that period of time, that's one of the biggest things that they love about the church now versus the church then, is that there are a lot of kids here, and it just gives a vitality to a church that you can't get really any other way. So I think that would be they would see that as a big difference, and I would too, between then and now.
So a question for the both of you: in which ways has God proven himself faithful to the church over the years?
Oh, that's a great question. He has been incredible in providing young families for this church, and they keep coming. And we don't know why. We think it's because of our youth minister.
That's what it is.
He's very attractive. The kids really want to be like David.
God really has been very faithful to his church at Cadiz, both from a standpoint of providing and excluding myself from that group, but providing some exceptional leadership in the church that over the years has made some, not decisions out of their own wisdom, but have really sought God's wisdom in the direction of the church, and has really fostered that within the church. Also, ministers over the years who have been very biblically oriented and have really preached the truth of the gospel, which has become very novel these days as opposed to the norm. So that he's been very faithful in that. Each minister that he has provided to us, and I've been around for a few, has really been the right person for the right time, the right moment, and that none of that was because of any of us. It was just because God knew what we needed. Even when we didn't know what we needed, he knew what we needed and provided that.
All right, so Jeff, with all this in mind, explain the mission of the church.
Our mission is to glorify God and to help others reach their full maturity in Christ. And that second part, glorifying God is something that we do through worship. It's something we do through serving and giving. But that growing into the very character of God, helping others to reach that goal of perfection, which we never reach here on earth, but through the process of sanctification, we become more and more like Christ. That is something that has to be modeled. It has to be shown, and not something that you can just open up the Bible and say, here it is. It has to be something that a life proves that they have been opening up that Bible. They have been reading through and discovering God's truth, not just in what it says, but in how to actually surrender to that truth and apply it in their life.
Right. So now, Eric, how does this building fit in with that mission?
Well, one of the things that we have found over the years is that you're much more successful in evangelizing people at a young age, because quite frankly, as humans, as we get older, we get into our habits, and it's harder to change them the longer you're in those habits. So this fits in really well from a standpoint of ministering to kids and winning kids to Christ at an early age that will keep them from departing from that as they go into adulthood and they have children and grow in their lives. So it definitely fits in that way. I think the other way it fits in, and Jeff and I talked a little bit about this recently, is in families being willing to invite other families to the church. You don't want to invite families to a place where their children will not be taken care of, or they may not have hot water, as we know out in the big house now. But you want to be able to invite them to places that you know they'll be comfortable, they'll be excited about. And that's not to say that we haven't had that up to this point, but we came to a point in the big house where that was kind of going by the wayside a bit, and it was going to take quite a bit to repair that. So we want to make sure that our families are comfortable inviting their friends and their friends' children, confidently knowing they're going to learn about Christ here, they're going to get connected with other people here, and that kind of thing. So I think that really is a big part of the mission of the church.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Jeff?
Well, I just think that something David said one time, studies he's done prove that parents will only take their family to a place that's as nice as the home they live in. And that is really cool when you think about the beautiful building we have here. Not so cool when you think about going outside to a building that on the outside looks like it needs some serious work. Inside, we've done a pretty good job of patching it up and hiding the flaws.
Right.
Besides, the two buildings are disconnected. In the wintertime, it becomes pretty obvious that these two buildings stand in stark contrast from each other, and you've got to go through snow and ice at times to get there. It takes a lot of wanting to get to that place. So if you're not attracted to it, if it doesn't look like your own home, I'm afraid there are new families or visiting families that, for that reason, may not come back.
Yeah.
So how did we come to the decision to build this new building?
Well, we were forced at some level to come to this decision. I mean, we knew that there were a lot of repairs that needed to be done on the big house, and we had a good idea of how much it was going to cost to do it. And at some point, you become somewhat upside down in a building. It's going to cost more to repair it than it's really going to be worth when it's done, and also from a standpoint of longevity. So that was probably the biggest catalyst. It certainly wasn't the starting point.
No, we started
for that
years
decision.
ago talking about that.
Yeah, we have literally, we were, again, Jeff and I were talking about this not too long ago. I would say it's been at least 6 years.
It was before David was hired.
It was. Because I remember when we interviewed David, that's one of the things that we talked about was our desire to do this. So there has been a lot of prayer. We have a retreat each summer, spring. We do it sometime during the summertime. And many years we have talked about this.
Every year it seems it's on the agenda. It's a huge topic. We talk and talk about it, and we walk away not doing anything about it. It reminds me of that old joke that says, once upon a time there was a church filled with ducks, and the pastor duck would get in front of the church and say, You can fly, and they'd get all excited and flap their wings, they could fly, but every Sunday they left the church and waddled home.
Yeah, yeah.
Every retreat, we left the retreat and waddled home.
Had great ideas.
Yeah.
It's just the implementation that just never came about. And maybe it was, I'd say it was likely that it was God, that just said, I don't know if now's the time.
Timing.
Yeah.
All right. So speaking of that timing, why now?
Why now, Jeff?
Well, we had also debated for years about the need for a discipleship minister. Not as long.
No, not as long.
Not as long. But that need to have somebody over small groups, because small groups is really how you grow a church and how you deepen the church. And Deep and Wide is a book we did a study on in the eldership, and we just knew we need to go in that direction. And at the same time, we knew we needed to expand in our children's ministry, and we debated between the two. And I think because we are at the point where the building needs to be seriously looked at, we have got to either replace the big house with something or repair that big house. We're at the point where we're going to need to make a decision. We finally decided, hey, we've been debating between these two, which comes first, chicken or the egg, and finally decided that we really need both. And so our prayer is bigger than this building. Our prayer is that we are able to build a building and soon after that hire a discipleship minister.
And I would add to that, as well, that the decision of when to do it and doing it now, we have really, probably over the last 2 or 3 years, made a concerted effort to have kids up front in the service.
Yes, we have.
at doing something where people would see them. And
because we stick them back in a trailer, they never see them.
Yeah.
They never see what kids are to our church.
Yeah.
They're a huge part of our church.
Yeah. And having those kids up front, and then having the big house in the condition that it was in, seemed a little bit out of kilter, honestly, to where, we're like, if kids are really that important to us, that we really want to have them up front, we want people to know that we have some great kids in this church, we really need to, do an upgrade on that. So I think that was part of it, too. It was that whole concept.
Do you remember our first plan was to actually put a building out front? Because we had talked about
Yeah,
so much. We want
that's
to bring
right.
our kids up front. We want to bring our kids up front. And it just seemed so natural. Well, of course, let's take over the parking lot with a building out front. That's
Yeah.
all for the kids. And of course, totally impractical,
Yeah.
but it was a fun dream.
Obviously, the main focus is on the children, but in what other ways can it impact the church?
I think space is a huge one.
Yeah.
Having a building like that, this is funny, but ever since I've been here, storage has been an issue. And you would think, well, there's no way we're going to build a building just for storage. I think there are a few people in the church that would say, amen, we need a building for storage. It's about time. Our 2 storage areas are pretty pathetic, and this block building will have a storage area that's much larger than both of them combined.
Yeah. I mean, we need office space. Both Julie and David are essentially in a closet right now. Julie has been for years. David inherited that recently. So David would have his office in this new building, which would create some space in here for us. Plus, you have the crib nursery moving to a new location, which creates some space.
Yeah.
We really are in one of our end goals also is that we will no longer have a Sunday school class in the auditorium, but that it will be in an actual classroom space instead, and I think we can create that out of this as well. But beyond that, one of the things I love about being in this community is things like having this as a polling place where people come and vote. I want people in this church every minute they can possibly be in here so that they'll be familiar with it, and if they decide to go to church somewhere, they're going to be like, well, I go to Cadiz to vote. Let me go over there and check that out, see what that church is like. Same thing with community groups in the church, or in the community rather. Whether it is a celebration recovery group, whether it's the extension of the counseling services that we already offer in the church, these are great ways to get the community involved. We would love to raise enough money to be able to have an indoor playground, which would be a great opportunity for us to have mothers bring their kids in during the day when it's raining outside, come in and play, in the church. And there again, it just gets them in there, and then they're like, wow, this is a great facility. Let's come here Sunday and see what's going on.
All right, last question. We've seen and heard the phrase equal sacrifice, not equal gifts. Tell us a little bit about that and what it means.
I'm glad that you said you had seen it and heard it, Caleb, because if you hadn't, we have really failed at what we were trying to do. But Jeff, go ahead, explain that.
Equal sacrifice, not equal gifts is huge because we all compare. I compare what I drive to what someone else drives. I compare, is my body like his body? We all compare, and we compare financially, and we use it as a measuring stick. Not only do we use it as like what salary do you make, but we also use it as what are you able to give. And unfortunately, when you see something like, wow, we're trying to raise $600,000, that scares a lot of people because that number is just unreal when you look at it on its own. But the problem is what we're doing when we look at just that number and then we compare is we say, there's no way that I can give anything that's going to really take a huge chunk away from that. I don't think anybody is going to even notice what I'm able to give compared to the huge chunk. And what we want to do so badly is just take away that whole comparison when it comes to how much I can give to the campaign and realize this is a spiritual commitment. And God doesn't ask us to compare the amounts we give. He asks us to compare the sacrifice that we give. He modeled it for us. He sent his son and gave us everything. And he says, what I want you to do is feel this. It should impact you in some way. You let me worry about the $600,000. You take care of the sacrifice.
And the beautiful thing, we have a banner in the auditorium that lists the goals for the campaign, and it lists 3 levels of goals. And we had some questions about why would you have 3 levels? Isn't the goal to raise $600,000? Well, really, the bigger goal is to create great stewards in the church. If we get $600,000 in the process, I'll be happy with that. That's fine. The reason there's 3 goals up there is because we want people to know, among other things, that it is not just about raising $600,000. It is about sacrificial giving. And sacrificial giving may equal $600,000, and it may not. But if it's sacrificial giving, God will be pleased, and he'll take care of whatever we need, at that point.
Anything else you guys would like to add about this project?
No, I think we've covered a lot of things. I would just say, it has been both stressful, and we talked about this a little bit at rally number 3 this week, but it has been stressful for all of us. It's been stressful for our team leaders in this as well. But man, the payoff that we have seen, the ways we've seen God working in this campaign, truly does make it, for lack of a better term, worth the price of admission. It really has been a tremendous journey, and we don't intend for it to stop when we have First Fruit Sunday. We intend for it to continue. We want the momentum to continue. So those people who are leading now, we're going to challenge them to continue to lead in other areas of the church. The people who have learned now to give sacrificially, we're going to challenge them to keep giving sacrificially, going forward, and challenge ourselves in that process as well. So it's just been a tremendous project. I don't know in my history with this church that we have ever done anything of this scope that has grown this church in a short period of time as much as it has.
And we don't even know what the long-term effect is going to be.
No, we don't.
I'm not talking about the number that we end up
Yeah.
with or the residual numbers that we end up with. I'm talking about the youth that have witnessed us sacrifice.
Yeah.
The children who someday will hear stories about how we have sacrificed.
Yeah.
And the things that they're going to grow up in and learn about Jesus and go on from here and do. We have no idea the kind of impact, but we've seen the beginning of it, and it's exciting.
And we've seen, I'm glad that we're in front of this historical board for this video, because these people, many of them are seeing now the results of their sacrificial giving. And it was sacrificial.
From years ago.
Yeah, from years ago. And now this new generation, if you will, is going to experience what they're experiencing now maybe 15, 20 years, 30 years down the road, and it's going to be a great thing. And then hopefully they're going to raise up another generation that's going to do the same thing and come to the same truths that they've come to in their lives. So it's very cool to see God at work.
Yes, it is.
All right, well, thank you for you guys' time today.
Caleb, thank you.
All right, well, there you have it from Senior Pastor Jeff Johnson and Church Elder Eric Stewart talking about the past vision and the current vision for Cadiz Christian Church.
You wrote a letter and you signed your name. I read every word of it page by page. You said that you'd be coming for me soon. Oh my God, I'll be ready for you. I wanna run on greener pastures. I wanna dance on higher hills. I wanna drink from sweeter waters in the misty morning chill. And my soul is getting restless for the place where I belong. I can't wait to join the angels and sing. No, I can't wait to join the angels and sing my heaven song.